thank you for joining us. I know many more are coming in right now, so we appreciate that you're with us today. Today, we're going to be talking about the corporate social mind, and I'm joined by some wonderful friends, peers, colleagues, fellow authors, leaders, all of those things. I think everybody that's in our Zoom cadence here, our sort of gallery, has so many different titles and roles that we wear. And quite honestly, I think some of those have even expanded given COVID and the pandemic overall. Today's conversation, and really is a conversation, is a chance for all of us to talk about not only what's happening, but some of the recent research that myself and my colleagues at Michael and here at Cause of Social Influence and Influence SG have all been working together on as well. Our plan today is to walk through not only the research in the book, but open it up to you for a discussion with us. And don't worry, we are recording, so you can kind of head back, because I know that my fellow colleagues who are joining me will be offering some great insights together. I want to first begin by talking a little bit about who's with us and joining us all together. Myself, Derek Feldman, I'll be moderating our discussion together, obviously co-author of The Corporate Social Mind. And I have kind of two hats. My first hat is leading some work at Influence SG, where we look at movement design from the brand and cause side. And then in addition to that, my role at the Ad Council, where I actually work on Ad Council Edge, which is the strategic consulting arm of the Ad Council as well. I'm joined by my colleagues, Michael Alberg-Seberich, my fellow co-author, who's waving right there. Michael, if you want to just say a few words.
Well, thank you, Derek. And as you already pointed out, I'm your co-author. We could talk days about the fact how Derek dragged me to write this book. So maybe that's for another webinar. And I'm one of the partners at Wider Sense, and Wider Sense is an advisory firm here in Berlin, in Europe, Germany, and we work with companies and foundations on their social impact strategies.
Wonderful. And we're also joined by two peers and friends, colleagues as well. Michael and I were talking about this webinar, and the two of these individuals made perfect sense to join us today. The first one I want to introduce you to is Christine Montenegro McGrath, who's actually with Mondelez International. Christine, thanks for being with us.
Hi, Derek. Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you today. Thanks so much for having me.
Wonderful. Do you mind just giving everybody I mean, I think we've all seen your title up there, but tell me what the real
What the heck does that mean?
What do you do?
Sure. So I work for Mondelez International. We're the Oreo people, as we're commonly known, one of the world's biggest snacks companies. And what I do is lead the overall company's work on sustainability and well-being. And a big part of our focus is how we can have a positive impact on people and the planet.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thanks, Christine. We'll be back in a little bit. But my other friend and colleague, who I just recently had the chance to kind of get to know a little bit through our peers, friends, and contacts, and that's Afdhel Aziz. Afdhel, good to see you.
Hey guys, what's up? Greetings from Los Angeles. Thanks for having me, and hi everybody on the call and Zoom. Looking forward to chatting today.
Wonderful. Well, and we don't have it on there, but Afdhel's been a real big leader in the purpose movement, obviously with Conspiracy of Love and your book, and you have another one coming out too soon as well, fellow co-authors here.
Yes, so I co-wrote Good is the New Cool, which came out in 2016, which is at the beginning of this whole purpose brand conversation. We have a new book coming out called The Principles of Purpose, which is going to be in the September of this year. And right now, I run Conspiracy of Love, which is a social impact consultancy, which has the privilege of working with companies like Mondelez. We're working on Oreo at the moment, but also Adidas, Microsoft, Red Bull, a whole bunch of brands who are all on their purpose journeys. So it's a tremendous time to be working in this space. And thanks for having me here.
Absolutely, it is. It is. And I know that each of us kind of comes at it from different perspectives and points of view, which is why we wanted to make sure Afdhel was with us. Obviously, having Christine, who has to do this on a daily basis, it's always helpful to have those that are actually, that's their core job every day, as well as us who work outside the scenes to try to partner and work closely with you as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael here to talk a little bit about our agenda and what our plan is today. He may have some ground rules for us too, just to kind of help us put ourselves into perspective. So Michael, go ahead.
Thank you, Derek. And yeah, I think before we come to the agenda, just very briefly, remember netiquette one more time. And so it's very helpful if that everybody turns their microphones off if not the facilitator turns them off. And by the way, what you can do on the chat, maybe you write, everybody who is there right now, write in from which city or which country they are so that we can see what the spread of the audience is. That would be actually really fantastic. So please go into the chat and write your city or your country. That would be cool. And I think the other thing that is important is in regards to netiquette, that we want this to be a respectful and fair environment. And we want good and constructive conversations. And that actually should also be reflected, hopefully, in a very collaborative tone. And if you have questions, please state them via the chat. And I can now see cities and US states and countries are coming in. Wow, we're definitely all over the United States. That's pretty cool. In regards to the agenda, Derrick will first guide us through the corporate social mind research that we published last week, and then have discussions on that. And from there, we will go into the book, The Corporate Social Mind, and also look a little bit at the framing of the book and some of its core ideas. And then again, especially have a discussion also with our panel guests, and in addition with everybody who is on the call. We are really looking forward to an engaging conversation. And well, Derrick, let's take it from here.
Absolutely. So I just want to follow up with one thing is that please feel free to put things in the chat if you'd like to. For questions related to ourselves and the panelists, please do that in the Q&A. That will be a little bit easier for us overall. So as Michael mentioned, we have been on this journey on the corporate social mind for a little while. Actually, he and I have been working for several years in and around this environment. My sort of perspective as we have talked about the corporate social mind in general, I come at it from the sort of public engagement side of the world, specifically working with brands and even on the other side, which is how do we get the public to act for social issues, specifically companies in general too, how can they be sort of using their platforms, their voice, their relationships and everything to advance society overall. My colleague Michael had come at this really spending a lot of time on the impact side, which is, how do we have measurable impact with our initiatives, whether it be through CSR or through other things, and that happens between our departments, whether that be CSR, sustainability, social impact engagement foundation work, all related to the corporate side. And when we began this, I will say that what 2020 was going to bring in store was an interesting one, and I don't think none of this was planned. I think Afdhel would agree maybe with this statement. When you plan to release a book, you're hopeful that the world is ready to listen. Wow, this was a heck of a year to put out a book on being mindful of what's happening to society in general, especially when you're releasing it in July overall, coming out of COVID and the movements that we have, not only in the US, but also what we're seeing globally too as well, and the reactions to everything going on. And I lead research, and we always look at how primarily the public, the consumer base, is engaged in these issues and how they view consumer engagement themselves on these social issues that are happening. And the common question I get, which I know that maybe Christina has to wrestle with every day and Afdhel has to address with his clients, which is, should we act? How do we act? What does that look like? How do we make sure that we do it appropriately and so forth? And so as part of the book, we wanted to really get into what is the expectation now and how does that sort of square with the mindset overall. So we started with, this is really fresh to be quite honest, we were in the field the weekend of June 20th, that weekend, that date. And because we know that, and it's also lucky, I guess, that I get a chance to work with my research colleagues. When you kind of are part of a research group, you can unleash that really quickly too as well. But what we wanted to do is to truly understand in this moment and not just look at something that happened last year as we were looking at developing the book, but really what's occurring right now. And as you see on there, we wanted to understand what were the issues that the consumer public is saying companies are asking them to get involved with. And it's not surprising that we see sort of right now in this moment, the civil rights, racial discrimination, social justice issues, topics, COVID in particular too as well. We see our animal rights and hunger too. Now, we had a broad base. We actually had a lot of different options. I'm only sharing with you right now the top 4 that came out of 1,000 individuals, American individuals that are in the US based, live in the United States, and census rep overall 1,000 individuals on June the 20th. I'm happy to share more of those if any of you want to email me or message with us. We're happy to share the other issues and where they stand. But in addition to this, we wanted to get at and understand specifically what companies were asking them to do with these issues. And as you'll see all the way on the left, and when you have a graphic like this that's stretching, of course, the whole the whole thing, I think what's really important here is to look at what's the most dominant, and that is sharing content on their social platforms around an issue and topic. This gets to that voice thing that I was mentioning quite earlier around sharing and being involved on some of these social issues, and what are the stances of companies overall too as well. But specifically looking at it when it relates to those, I think what's important here is that bottom right sort of black circle that you see there, which is doing nothing overall. The vast majority of the public has a little bit of an expectation that companies are going to be vocal and participatory on social issues. Doesn't necessarily mean, and this is something that I talk about a lot with the companies I work with, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be the loudest voice, the leading voice, but actually being a voice and being present is important too. And I know we're going to have that discussion with Afdhel and Christine and how that really looks a little bit later. But as you see with the different of these actions, it's common, things around fundraising and donations and volunteerism coming out there in some of this. But again, it comes down to that position. Where is the company stands? And some of this relates to one's purpose, as Afdhel has spent a lot of his time. Some of it relates to some of the issues that, while it might be encompassing within that purpose, these are issues that haven't been addressed yet. Or if they have been addressed by policy, they haven't necessarily been enforced through action, which is what we're seeing a lot right now when it comes to fulfilling that. Specifically, we were wanting to try to understand, how does this change though when we're getting into issues of certain big issues in the United States? And I'll mention to my international peers and colleagues who are joining us on the webinar that we actually, the next one is a study that will be this same study in Germany. We're looking at Canada and a couple other countries, Asian countries as well, that will be going into it too. And when we look at this, what I would say is that by far, employees in sharing position on race, as you see there in your left hand, if you look where my cursor is overall, this 57 and 57%. But sharing it through advertisements and events, especially when it comes to the environment or some of these other topics, begins to become a little bit different overall, becomes a sort of level out a little bit, but still high expectation. One of the things that we'll likely see potentially as we get closer to the election in the United States, potentially even if this was in other countries as an upcoming election, is to see how that voting piece sort of changes as we get even closer. Now, one of the things that we have in the corporate social mind is the mindset companies take towards the development of new products, goods, and services. And what is the expectation as we go now forward in developing those products, goods, and services? Not just where we have been, but what does it look like ahead? And specifically, as we see here, impacts on the environment. And these are some things that I'm going to be asking Christine about a little bit, is what Mondelez is obviously doing in this area. But the other thing is that there were some that were just saying, I don't expect anything, right? That same sort of 30 percentile, 26 to 30 percentile. But the rest of this is, how is it going to impact people? First, employees, looking at that as to me personally and my family overall. So our biggest takeaway out of this is the expectation going forward is environment, and how does this personally impact me as whether I work with you or for you, and or my family and the immediate people in and around us. You can obviously see the rest and download the report that's there. Of course, this all sort of happens if it holds true, right? And we wanted to go into this to try to do what we call a conjoint exercise to determine whether or not the public would really put some dollars behind that consumer decision in general. So we forced decision. We said that they had to choose a soft drink, which I did hear from somebody that is not the healthiest piece right now, but that was not our intent. Our intent was to try to understand, if we're forcing decision, what that really looks like. And the examples that we show here is the public's not overwhelmingly moving towards how, making and squaring that with economics, But our goal now is to continue to track some test variations. Afdhel and I had a chance to connect before this, and we've been talking about different ways to test this. And quite honestly, we look forward to doing some of those. But here's what's really interesting is that we live in a pandemic environment where economic systems and finances for some individuals have dramatically changed this and have put this into a different realm. Let's see what it looks like going forward, knowing that while the public may not sort of back that with some of their existing current purchasing, is that we're also in a sort of a different economic system than we were a year ago. Lastly, is that we do share here, and this is a lot of data to take in. I would just say that we were asking individuals to share with us where they think a lot of the sort of change should come from in trust when it comes to individuals within companies. And basically, they trust a lot of the employees. The management has a little bit of work, and then we even ask when it comes to racial equality, social justice, and discrimination. There's a whole section in the report that you can get to as well. But I think the big takeaway for trust in here is employees are the most trusted. Functional areas, it'd be interesting to see, as we have not necessarily seen different functional areas within the company. We used to just broadly say, do we trust companies? But now let's sort of break that down. Are there certain leaders within companies where that trust is quite different? And it really comes down to the employees than it does to some of the leadership too as well. So that's kind of leads us to our discussion here. And before I get there, I'd say make sure that you download it. It's at thecorporatesocialmind.com. This is the first of many different benchmarking that we're going to do around the mindset that we look at, not only in this moment, but future moments and movements that are going to occur not only in the United States, where we started first, but also throughout the world too. And speaking of world, that kind of brings me to my international colleague here with Michael. And the work that he's been doing. Michael, what have you seen when it comes to sort of this mindset and what's happening, and maybe even in Europe and in some of your global clients?
Well, thank you, Derek. I think one of the key things is definitely, as you already pointed out, that the report looks at a couple of issues that are definitely have a lot more attention in the United States right now. Even though there is actually a lot of support for Black Lives Matter and racial inequality issues, that is definitely becoming really strong. But especially on the climate change, I would say in Europe, that is the issue that is also really that is on the mind of companies, and also many of the companies that we also work with. And the question of what can there, besides classical sustainability, meaning energy saving, CO2 consumption reduction, what can be their contributions towards that issue, and how can they support people, humans around the world in that field. We're also coming to climate mitigation and getting ready. And so there's climate education as another issue that is coming up right now very often. And so that is something that seems to be of great concern, or that is of great concern also with consumers. And I'm pretty sure that would be one of the key differences that we would find when we do the report also in Europe. But the key thing, and that is, I think, is dramatic, is this taking a stand for an issue here as it is asked for by the consumers. And that is something, as you know, from our discussions, where I see European companies often a lot more reluctant than American companies. And that is maybe because there's a different relationship to the state and government. So we will see how that is going to evolve.
Thanks, Michael. Christine, I want to kind of start with you, because you're inside a company doing this every single day and making those decisions happen. When you see sort of this expectation and the stuff that the public is talking about, what comes top of mind when you see this?
So thanks so much, Derek, for having me today, and thank you, Michael. It's great to be here. I guess it's not surprising. It's something that we've understood from consumers as we talk with them around the world, that actually their desire to see brands have purpose and companies have purpose. And with real tangible examples of that is something that we've seen, for probably at least 10 years now in the research, and it definitely grows. And as you saw in your research, Derek, what the issue might be definitely ebbs and flows a bit. But that consistency for us, we did a lot of work and issued a company purpose about 2 years ago of empowering people to snack right. And that really has become the bedrock of everything that we do around our company, from our well-being efforts, sustainability, and then right through to what each of the individual brands are doing.
Yeah. And Christine, one of the things around there is high expectation and new product service development, of looking at the environment, and then families and employees. Talk about how you're going about that process, if at all, especially when I know you've been doing lots of work on cocoa and cocoa farmers. We talk about that in the book too as well. I'd love to, if you could share that with the audience.
Sure. So what we understand is, for consumers, well-being and sustainability have a lot of overlap. You know, consumers want to understand, like, what is in the product? Is it good for me? Where did it come from? How were the ingredients sourced? You know, is it locally sourced or not? How are the farmers and the workers treated who made the product? So it's a very comprehensive view and understanding that consumers have. And so what we've done is we take that consumer understanding, as well as just looking at the data and understanding, if, you know, for us, climate change is one of the biggest sustainability issues, opportunities for us to tackle. And we look at all of the data to understand, what does that mean? For us, about 60% of our CO2 comes from just growing the raw materials, the cocoa, the wheat, et cetera, that go into our products. So we've been working for a long time to work on reducing the impact of climate change in those ingredients, as well as making sure that the farmers who grow, we have a program, Cocoa Life, which we talk about in the book, is our signature program, because we want to make sure that, you know, the cocoa farmers have a very vibrant future and very productive business for themselves and their families and their communities. If they're having a very productive business, then they're great partners to us for the long run. We want to be in chocolate for a very long time. We want to grow chocolate. We need the farmers to be healthy and growing along with us. And so it's a program that we've been working on for, we launched it in 2012. And committed $400 million in the program. And today we've scaled from starting at ground zero to now 65% of our chocolate is sourced with cocoa through the program. We're working with about 175,000 cocoa farmers in 6 different countries around the world. And we're on our way to get to 100% of our chocolate being sourced by 2025. So it's definitely a journey. We've gotten a lot of learnings, and the challenges are massive, and we can talk about this a little later, but one of the things I would say that we're doing a lot of work on is what we're doing ourselves as a company, and then really driving industry change and working collaboratively with other companies, peer companies, because some of these, you know, climate change, plastic pollution, all these COVID, you know, building back better, a lot of these things are not something that any one company can solve on their own. So that's another big opportunity.
Absolutely. So Afdhel, I'm off to you now. You saw some of the research. You and I had a brief discussion last week when we were kind of looking at this. What are your thoughts initially, and especially as it relates to some of the purpose work that you're doing?
Yeah, I think it's important to point out how significant the shift in society over the last 3 months has been. You know, I think if you've been working in this space for a while, it's been somewhat of a niche topic, right? Even though we are privileged to work with brands in different sectors, from fashion to CPG to technology, it was only a few of those, probably the leaders in those sectors, who really took this topic seriously. Like Mondelez has done a tremendous job in also cascading that corporate purpose down to lots of its other brands as well. But what we have just seen in the last 3 months is an explosion of interest in this topic. And it's gone from theory to practice, right? Yeah. Consumers are saying, show me the receipts. All right, you're going to post about Black Lives Matter. I want you to show me what is the composition of your board. What is the contributions you're making to Black-owned businesses? You know, what is your diversity and inclusion pipeline and training, right? And so consumer expectation has gone through the roof, but also you have to couple this with consumer cynicism. Right, about corporations. And I think that was reflected in I don't know if people noticed, in marketing, in Business Leaders You Trust, marketing unfortunately scored the lowest.
Yeah.
As a marketer.
I know. And Afdhel, I spend most of my time with the marketing side than I do with the CSR side. And
I think
I'm a former marketer too. Terrible. Yeah.
So I kind of see that, but I kind of understand that, right? Consumers have said, hey, I've seen you guys talk about this stuff for a long time. Now I want you to walk the walk. show me the receipts, show me what you're actually doing. And so now what we're seeing is a heightened level expectation for transparency. Right? I want to see the good you are doing. I want to see how you treat your employees. I'm going to go on Glassdoor and see how employees talk about your business. You know, so I think it's a fascinating moment to be having this conversation, because it is going from niche to mainstream, and it's coming with much higher expectations from consumers.
Yeah. Before we get to the audience questions, because they're coming in for all of us here, I want to ask Christine, because we're bringing up this, Afdhel talked about this moment. I'd love to know from you, how did Mondelez respond to the current moment that we're in? I would love to hear sort of where you have been thinking and what's been happening.
Sure. So diversity and inclusion. I actually am on our Global Corporate Diversity and Inclusion Council, which we've had for the last few years, probably we're on our third year now, and we've been focused a lot on women, on gender equality. It's something that, you know, we do within our own employee ranks, and we do in community programs like Cocoa Life. So it's near and dear to my heart. But with the whole Black Lives Matter and everything that happened, it really was an important moment, I think, for us to have some honest reflection around, you know, has racial inclusion and diversity been enough of a focus area for us as a company? And as you said, the numbers, you know, what do our numbers look like? And it's through our entire, I would say, senior management all the way through the company, just a big part of reflection for us. We had Juneteenth. In the US, we had that day away from work to really spend time learning, reflecting, talking with families, and that came from our CEO. We had an internal webinar that he and our president of North America and some of the folks from our African American Council in the US spoke, and it was just really poignant and moving to understand, you know, to learn more about the issue. And I know a lot of other colleagues spent time, you know, with my own family reflecting on it. So what we're working towards is now a whole comprehensive plan for us as a company, to both across the company as well as within each business unit. We have 14 business units around the world. We also did a lot of conversation around, you know, is this issue relevant? Inclusion, is this just a US issue, or does this resonate around the world? And what we found is actually does resonate around the world. There's all kinds of discrimination. That's kind of the common theme that happened. Sometimes it's religious, sometimes it's social, socioeconomic status, sometimes it's racial, but it's definitely an issue that as a company we are rallying around with a comprehensive plan. And we want to do it well, and we want to put in have targets and metrics and programs for our own employees, as well as you know, for our suppliers and our communities. And I think, you know, the important last thing I'll say is it's not just about the numbers, but it's really having that culture where inclusivity is valued, and that people feel welcome to be themselves within the company. And that's the kind of culture that we are working to further build.
Okay. And I suspect that will also include probably some actions coming out of that too as well.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. Investments in communities, et cetera, and with suppliers.
So Chris, I'm going to stay with you real quick here, and then I'm going to go to Afdhel, because there's a question that came in around all the good work you're doing with Oreo and all the other information, and said, is that kind of information, Cocoa Life or any of these other kinds of initiatives on packaging, and is it that they just didn't get that or see that, or is this something that it's too high of a cost? What's the barrier to maybe some of that if it's not on there?
So one of the things that we talked about earlier that I'm glad this question came in actually is, for us with Cocoa Life in particular, transparency has just been so important in the program since the beginning. So cocolife.org is our website. So where we do have Cocoa Life cocoa in our products, you'll see the little logo on the front or back of pack. And I think typically, we have the website, and we've been very transparent about our journey, our progress, our challenges. We have maps on there where you can see the farmers that we're working with and where they are. So we have been, you know, and you can sign up and get newsletters and emails about what it is that we're doing.
Got it. So is it would you say, right now it's definitely for more of the conscious, or is there, you're trying to push even further to get some of this into the mainstream? As Afdhel has said, I mean, we have come a far way, even in this year, as just to be a little bit more conscious. What's sort of the future hold for some of that?
We're definitely doing more. I mean, part of what we wanted to do is be careful that it does, with a program like Cocoa Life, that we weren't accused of greenwashing, because when we got started, I mean, we first of all, we had to, we did a lot of work when we got started back in 2011 and 2012 on this journey, assessing, we were buying, certification at that point, certified cocoa. We had our own pilot program in Ghana under the Cadbury brand. So we did a lot of work to assess what was working out in the world and what should we create in Cocoa Life. And then we built the program over time, like with actual partners and work on the ground, and then started to analyze the data and have the results. We've only started then talking about it with our brands when we felt like we had something, probably about 5 years into the work, where we actually had enough cocoa through the program to start to supply our brands, and some proof points to be able to feel like, okay, we've got something to say. And I think that was the right approach. So you'll see more and more of our brands, now that we've got cocoa at a good amount and coming into the brands. Cadbury started this year talking about the work that they've been investing in Cocoa Life, significant amounts of money for years now, and they're just starting to talk about it with consumers. And a little bit of the campaign, they're all about generosity, that brand, and it's a little bit about, all this time you've been enjoying Cadbury chocolate, you didn't even realize that you're investing in a brand that's, been doing, making these kinds of difference in the world. So.
Yeah, sort of the behind the scenes investment into the community that you make with every action of purchase and so forth.
Exactly.
So, absolutely. Afdhel, one of the early questions was around, you've been involved in a lot of this, and what are the trends that you see in sort of the value creation in the business case for purpose, and how that relates to the corporate social mindset?
Yeah, I think it's, a helpful analogy to think about purpose is digital, right? So think about the adoption curve and how corporations built up the capability for digital over the last 10 years, right? It started out in kind of, in a very basic mode. Digital was a website, right? And then you started to see the adoption of digital in different channels, whether it's CRM or whether it's in your supply chain or whether it's in your social media. Kind of the same thing is happening in purpose, right? So 10, 15 years ago, I think the consumer expectation of where good happens in a company would have been only in the CSR department, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And then you started to see brands start to do early cause marketing stuff, where you started to link the consumer messaging into social impact, environmental. Now it's in supply chain. Now it's in where you spend your money, right? So it's fascinating to watch the Facebook debate play out, advertisers pulling money out of Facebook and saying, just like we want our supply chains to be pristine, we want our media supply chains to be pristine. We're not going to spend money on places that we think are actually detrimental to society. So what you're seeing is a blossoming of this topic, a maturing of this topic, much like digital, and corporations realizing the importance of it as being as transformational as digital was to their business. I think that's where we are right now. And what is really fascinating is seeing it become closer and closer to the core business model of companies. That's really where it goes from being this ancillary thing that's a nice to have to being, no, we are in the business of making money by doing good for the world, right? I think it's no coincidence that right now Tesla is the #1 car manufacturer by value on the planet. It is bigger than Toyota. Tesla's share price every day seems to go higher and higher and higher. And I think it's a great example of how a company has put sustainability at the core of its business model and surrounded it with a great product at a great price. I actually test drove a Tesla Model Y last week, and oh my God, it's incredible, right? So when you have all of these things humming, a great product, a great price, a great purpose, that's when the magic happens. And I think that's where companies are realizing the power of having this clarity of thought and this vision and linking it into the core of what the business does, as opposed to it being siloed and scattered amongst multiple departments.
Yeah, Absolutely. Michael, let's talk about the relationship and synergy between sort of the corporate social mindset we've been talking about in the research and a social business model. Where are the same differences and so forth? Why don't you start and then I'll sort of chime in from there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I also saw that question. And I personally think that is very much in line because, and I will talk a little bit more about that, because mindset is really something that you want to have a very inclusive perspective on your business. And with our perspective of the corporate social mind, we always said you always need to have society on your mind. And many social business models and cases also do that. And then definitely the additional thing is really where do you feel yourself? As in some social businesses, they say profit is really not at all the target here. But with the corporate social mind, that definitely may not be that radical. But overall, I think there are quite a lot of similarities and synergies.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I have noticed and love to hear also my colleagues who are here is, you know, the brands that I have worked with, even if they had social business models, they still didn't practice a mindset that was focused on solving society, even though in living values and having purpose in the actions that they took, right? So it's one thing to have a policy or establishment that this is part of the core business model, but it's another thing to have people who continue to practice that. And I'll give you two things that were really specific in the brands that I had worked with. One is sort of the employees and talent who had shifted and changed. You know, the people who had set up those business models and were at the beginning of the foundations of those, of the core, were no longer there. And so that was a cultural issue. And Afdhel, I know you have to work on this a lot too, which is that purpose and culture and values wasn't transferred in the same way to the next wave of employees and leadership and talent coming in, which kind of gets at how strong these are. And then the second piece is it's the sort of push and pull between successful business, successful society, and what does that really look like when it comes down to developing a plan versus action. You know, I think, Christine, one of the ways you said it is you talked about you've learned a lot along the way. I'm sure the first time you launched Cocoa Life, and you and I have talked about this sometimes, is that, you know, you learn what really is happening and how that really enacts and really occurs from there. So I think it's more of a journey between not just a balance, but an infusion between the two. But it also means too that business models is one thing, practicing is another, and a third is the way in which leadership and others approach solutions and challenges, new product development, with thinking about society. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one model. It doesn't have to be any of those, but rather is how does this impact, what does it look like, and what will this mean for the future of society as we implement that? Afdhel, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's, you know, really about consistency, right? So I think the problem that you have is the tenure of a CEO is, I don't know, what, 2.5 years, tenure of a CMO is 19 months. So large corporations, these, you know, people are shifting around, even if they're staying inside the company, they're shifting brands, right? And each time somebody comes up with a new approach. So you have to see how important consistency of purpose is in building that culture. And then attracting people who want to be part of that culture, right? Who are attracted to the purpose of the company and say, I want to work at this company because I believe in what this company stands for. Consumers beginning to understand, yes, this is what, you know, this company has always stood for. You know, look at a company like Patagonia. It has stood for environmental sustainability right throughout, you know, so you can't underestimate the importance of consistency, of having that right throughout and not chopping and changing. And I think the other fascinating thing is the rise of what we call kind of citizen employees. Yeah. So in addition to consumers now saying, I'm going to hold this company to a high standard, the fascinating thing is seeing employees hold their leadership to a high standard, right? Yeah. And in recent weeks, we see that again. I bring up Facebook again. Facebook employees resigning because they disagreed publicly with their CEO. You've seen this happen in Amazon, in Google, in Wayfair, and so many companies. So CEOs also now have a new constituency to think about, which is their own employees who have, who said, listen, I wanted to work for this company because you had these values. Now it's time for you to show me how you're going to stand by these values, even when it may not be expedient to do so.
Yeah. Christine, any thoughts on that? And we're kind of talking about the book already, but go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that consistency for us, we felt it was really important not just to have a purpose statement, but to really bring the purpose to life. We developed what we call the purpose charter, and for us, it's leading the future of snacking by making snacks the right snack for the right moment, made the right way, and that really encompasses the work that we do, from well-being to sustainability. Mindful snacking is another big focus area for us, helping the consumers actually eat and enjoy snacks in a healthier way, not just about like what they're actually snacking on. So for us, that bringing it to life in a way that our brands could relate to. And then another important part for us is our leadership values. So we have very clear set of values that link directly to our purpose and make it very tangible. And I think your point around we talk about our colleagues. Our colleagues want to, they want to live the purpose. They are driving our brands to take this construct that I described and bring it to life in a way that's really relevant to themselves and their consumers. And I do think that that's part of what makes the purpose come to life, because otherwise it's just like something that's on the wall of the company. And I think finding that purpose that can spark that kind of inspiration, it took us a while, and but when people start to actually live it and breathe it and make it their own, I think that's how you're onto the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the book, The Corporate Social Mind, Michael and I talk about these traits overall you see on your screen right now. Michael, briefly, if you don't mind, kind of talk a little bit about the mindset, the 8 traits, if you could.
Yeah, and I think that will also cover some of the questions that people have been asking.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
It'll be good, Afdhel and Christine, if you get a chance to also chime in on where you're seeing this happen.
So the first thing really is, and that very briefly, because I said that already before, that it is the corporate social mindset. And especially, and I didn't realize that at the moment we had the idea for that title, but it's more than values. And I think that is really important. It is really living these values and not just proposing them, but really enacting them in your leadership culture and your all over corporate culture. So that is a very important point from our side in regards to the book. And the other thing, and that is something that is also referred to in the questions, is the book actually came out of a lot of conversations between Derrick and myself, and Derrick definitely a lot more focused on the communications and marketing side, and I'm come out of the impact side. And Christine knows that from her work with me, that I'm crazy about impact and how many people can we save and how many things can we do for good. But that is another thing here that we need to bring these worlds together again, because the book very clearly shows that yes, communications, having a voice is really important for a company, and it is also really important for social change. And I think, and for creating impact on the many issues companies are also involved in. And so that is the other thing that is really important, I think. And last but not least, there are still skills that we always will need. And these are some of the traits that we also mention in the book. And for sure, one of them I already mentioned is in one way or another, you need to measure impact. But on the other hand, it is about collaboration with others. It's opening that up, working with others. And then for a company, it is also realizing the many resources that they have. And it's not only money. And there's a lot, like we talked already about employees, we talked about skills and voice. There are a variety of things that can be done. Derrick.
Yeah, for me, as we were going through this, and Michael and I spent time with folks like Chris and some others, Daniel Lee, who I've worked with at Levi's, and Jen Foyle, who's with the Aerie brand of American Eagle, who is, took a leadership position when it came to body image and issues with young women. And the approach that we often saw is while they had values present, they were making decisions along the way that was more cognizant and receptive to what their consumers were really dealing with. You know, for Jen, for instance, it was difficult for her to make products knowing that not everybody fit that typical mold of what we expected in general. And that just shows that you as a marketer, product development, and overall take an approach and say, let's truly listen to where our consumers are, who they are, understanding the economic systems, the racial situation, the challenges, the barriers that they're experiencing. Because if we expect them to be successful with what we do, then they have to also, you know, we have to look at those things that are impacting that too as well. And so throughout all of these interviews, we consistently came up with these common themes, as you would see here, that were exhibited in many of the discussions in Michael with his work internationally and in my work primarily in the US. The other thing that I would say too, as we look at these traits and mindsets, is it's an approach to leadership. It's an approach which we look at as people go forward and from moments discussing further. And I think it's also a way to look at talent today. And how do we ensure that the talent that we bring in are not only that they're conscious of society, which by the way, most do, they desire that. I mean, I think Christine had a great point. You know, your colleagues want that. And there isn't a marketer in the world that I have met that's like, you know, I want to do harm to society, that's vocalized that, you know, but the challenge is what does that really look like in real life? I mean, I worked with a transportation company and there was an employee who said, you know, I love my life every single day because I actually am responsible for logistics between cities, primarily right now during natural disaster time, when they were dealing with stuff and just what that actually means. And I was up all night trying to figure out ways to get from point A to point B, knowing that that a whole city was dependent upon something in general. I mean, that's the kind of social and purpose that one can have. And it's a mindset that they're taking at it and they're going beyond just doing the logistical task, but to understand its implications in general to society right outside of it. Afdhel, what are your thoughts, and especially since sort of how that relates to the purpose side of the world?
Yeah, I think, you know, I agree with everything that you have here. I think it's also, this is something that we've been exploring in the next book, is the role of profitability. Right? Yeah. This is a corporation, this is a corporate environment, not philanthropy, right? And so what we've really seen is truly purpose-driven companies find ways to measure the impact of that purpose and build the business case, the ROI models for it. So it's really seen as contributing to the profitability of the company. I'm using profitability as a broad term. That could mean actual profitability, but it could also mean brand reputation, corporate reputation, other ways of measuring enhancement as well. So truly purpose-driven companies take the time to analyze and measure how these different initiatives, these social innovation initiatives, link back into the profitability of the company, right? And my favorite example to talk about this is Adidas, which is one of our clients. If some of you may know the story of the ocean plastic sneaker that they're making, they're selling 11 million pairs of these sneakers with $2 billion of incremental revenue generated by this, right? The more shoes they make, the more plastic they can pull out of the ocean, the more profitable the company comes. When the CFO of Adidas sees that line item on their P&L, they're going to be like, how do I do more of these? How do I generate more billions doing it, right? So that's an example. You know, you have Innovates for Social Good of a company that is actually saying, no, we can make money from solving the world's problems and do it in a way that's in line with our values and our corporate, our growth model as well. So you can't overestimate or underestimate the importance of profitability. Now, here's the paradox that we've discovered. Truly purpose-driven companies are prepared to lose money to stand by their values. And this is where it gets really interesting, right? So whether you look at what Nike did with Colin Kaepernick, what Patagonia did by suing the federal government, what CVS did by stopping selling cigarettes, what Dick's Sporting Goods did by stopping selling guns, consumers, when they see a company saying, we know we're going to lose money or we're going to lose consumers, we're going to do it anyway, that's really when there's a level of respect for the integrity inside a company. So that's almost the paradox of purpose. In the long term, it has to be profitable. But in the short term, if you really want to be seen as having that integrity, you may have to risk losing money as well.
Yeah. Chris, what are your thoughts? I'm curious now.
Yeah, no, I definitely think that like one of the terms that I talk about internally is the whole terminology of CSR, corporate social responsibility. I hate that language. No offense to anybody on the call who, but I mean, I grew up on the marketing side, and new product innovation. And to me, this is all about growth. And that is the mindset that I've brought to this area of like, okay, this keeps us, more relevant to consumers, making products and making them in a way that helps the environment. It definitely resonates with consumers. I think tackling problems that make our business more resilient, challenges in our supply chain, tackling climate change, plastic waste. I mean, these are issues that are, hurting the future viability of our own supply chain. The areas where we go to grow our ingredients, when it gets hotter or there's less land to grow them on, guess what, guys? That makes our future profitability and resilience of our supply chain more difficult. So there's definitely a business case. And we did some work at the beginning of this year to do exactly that. The return on sustainability, we call it ROSI metric, return on sustainable investment, to try to quantify in a model the tangible and intangible benefits and investments we're making to have a better tool for understanding the value that we're creating. It's not easy. I mean, I've chatted with a lot of experts about to put inputs into this model and to try to get our arms around it. This is, I think, still a new evolving area, but I just think that if you have the mindset that this is about business, and I also think, Michael, to your point, business has a lot to bring, like just the mindset that we bring when we, in Cocoa Life, work with a lot of NGO partners. We bring a mindset of like having KPIs, measuring progress. When we did our foundation program on healthy lifestyles, we're like, we want to measure like our kids exercising. We want to measure, are they eating more fruits and veggies as a result of this program, so that we know that we're not just, donating money to an NGO, but that we're actually driving kids to have healthier lives. Because if not, I think an important part you said earlier was, having metrics and learning from them. We call it MELV, is our acronym in Cocoa Life: measuring, evaluation, learning, and verification. And we added the L in there because we want to learn and fast adapt and adjust our program as we go forward in all of our programs to, again, I think that's a big mindset the business can bring on the very positive side, is that's how business works, right? If something's not working, you quickly adapt it and change it.
Absolutely. Well, we have about 5 to 6 minutes left, and there's questions that we are just coming in. So we're gonna try and get through as much of this before we depart here on the hour, because, well, everybody's got to get to what else they're working on today. So the first thing is around the respondents and the research. I'm gonna cover that real quick, which is, deciding to work for companies based on the corporate social issue stance. I can tell you, so obviously before this, if anybody knows me, I spend an enormous amount of time in the movement and youth space too, as well as it relates to brands or causes. And what we do know is after pay and benefits social issue engagement for younger employees under the age of 35 is sort of third in position. That's been validated with not only our research, but Net Impact and several other studies too as well. We didn't ask it in this study, but that's been a fairly constant, have to pay people and provide benefits. And then we start looking at social issues from there. That's been fairly consistent in the data overall. Afdhel, I don't know if you have anything on this. You might have, if you've seen anything different on your side.
No, I think we call it the new normal, being purpose and a paycheck, right? If you
want
to attract the best talent, you got to pay them well, give them benefits, but you also got to help people see how their work ladders up to something more important. And by the way, this research is not just Gen Z and millennials. This is every age cohort.
Exactly.
Boomers, Gen X. There is a new normal about what people want to feel like their lives have some meaning and some value.
Yeah. So one of the other next research questions is around whether this was focused on the service industry. We asked it broadly. Obviously, there's areas for further exploration in the service environment too as well. But all in all, I will say that that there's obviously ways we can dive deeper. We didn't do it in this case. And I think this is a really good one for us to talk about, is we are having these conversations. We've mentioned that in 2020 we have come far. There's a lot further to go in general. how do we have these more mainstream, especially where maybe inside the company right now, there's a dialogue about, and Ashley asked this here in the question, in and around, we don't want to talk about these issues or make people uncomfortable in general. Chris, I want to start with you. How does that kind of, that discussion happening, and where are you coming out with it?
Yeah, I think part of it's just being brave, right? To just start to have the conversation. And I think it's also being honest around, one of the things that we said on the whole diversity and inclusion when we first started was maybe you start the conversation and ask questions and listen, right? So just be open to listening. What are others, maybe your other colleagues thinking? What are they grappling with, et cetera, I think is a way to just, maybe to start the ball rolling.
Yeah. Michael, anything on that one too?
I think, as Christine said, it's very much a leadership thing. And if you look at, in the book, the interview with Rüdiger Fox from Sympatex is a very good example for that, how somebody like a CEO of a company said, I'm only going to survive here with a very courageous product, and that needs to be 100% recycled outdoor apparel. And at the beginning, everybody thought he's crazy to a certain extent. And now it is really a rather successful company that has stood up to a market where everybody thought this could never be possible. And I think we have a couple of these examples in the book where people really had the courage to stand up for something that nobody else thought could be possible at that moment. And that very much shows that leadership plays a very big role. And you could go on with some of the other examples in the book that also show that very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into one of the other questions. And again, if you want to put your Q&A in there, it's in the Q&A, not the chat. I know we're kind of going back and forth here overall. It's a very vibrant chat, which I appreciate. And this question comes from someone close to where I grew up. So you don't know, I grew up outside of St. Louis in general, so from Julio, and it's around this balance between maintaining between the legitimate impact of our efforts and what we do in the PR side and the marketing side, and how often they're sort of affiliated with it too. Sometimes I get the call, especially if they're in the youth consumer space, where somebody will say to me, Derek, we worked on this social issue. We spent so many years trying to look at how we want to tackle it, did our research, and then we sent this out. Our consumers didn't react, or we got some pushback from it. And oftentimes I find that the story told actually doesn't match the beneficiary or the person who it's probably trying to communicate with. In fact, it feels like an inauthentic story, one that specifically doesn't talk about the real person's situation, and it doesn't often express the challenges or barriers one feels really in that moment. It sort of talks about the loftiness of an issue in the positive, but yet trying to make it relatable for a consumer that's dealing with so many different kinds of things. There's a disconnect between the issue as well as what the beneficiary is experiencing in general. But that balance is often sort of out of sync when we haven't listened enough to the people who are likely to the target audience of the message in general, from the marketing, putting the marketing hat on. But Afdhel, I'd love to hear what you're thinking in this space when it comes to that balance between the story versus the impact.
Yeah, there are so many places where good intentions can go awry, right? And we kind of counsel our clients to think about a couple of mindsets that help. The first is this mindset of be the helper, not the hero. When you're talking about a social issue, do not position your brand or your company as being the savior. That way, you're gonna get accused of being egocentric or whatever else. Instead, think about how your brand or corporation can act as an enabler and facilitator for other people to get involved in helping to solve the problem, right? Together. How do you create a platform for social change so that your consumers and other stakeholders feel like they can participate? You're still going to get the halo effect of it, but it's going to come across a lot less like, hey, look at me in the spotlight.
Yeah.
And another finer point is always think about the proportionality. I will never forget this young guy I met at a conference a few years ago, and he said, when a brand spends $100,000 doing something good, and then $10 million telling me about that good thing, something smells fishy, right? That doesn't make sense. And the wonderful moment we're in is that today with social media and the kind of leveling of the playing field, you can spend $10 million on doing something good. And then if you do it right, your consumers will amplify that so it makes it feel like $100 million, right?
Yep.
That's the trick. How do you do something that's authentic and meaningful and really solves problems in society? People recognize that genuineness, and then they will become your messengers and avatars to help get it out there.
10 seconds, Christine, any final comments?
Yeah, no, I would just agree with that. I think making sure that you have the real substance and impact before you start talking about it, as I said earlier. And I think also making sure it's a right fit with the brand's equity. Our brands, you know, are taking a stand on different issues, but they are careful about making sure that it's relevant to the brand so that it's coming from a genuine place.
Absolutely.
I think that's key.
Thank you so much, Afdhel. Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Michael, obviously, always thank you in general. Thank you all for joining us today. Now, I will say that we've captured all the questions. We'll try to get back to those as much as possible. Sorry, we ran out of time. We're over too, and I apologize. We're also going to be doing a giveaway for those that actually put questions and then also those that did the chat. So you didn't even know that. So this is one of those hidden sort of nice things. We'll be doing a book giveaway. We'll be doing 2 of those. We'll let you know who is able to get that. So you can put your name in the chat if you'd like to, or in the Q&A. We wish you all the best as you go forward in this moment and the future for sort of this corporate social mindset, but also purpose and social responsibility in general. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Derek.
Having us.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.